Hey guys, my name is Rhinne. Today we're going to be doing a tier list. I'm currently the rank 1 player in North America. We've won multiple tournaments, blah, 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 all that good stuff. Today's tier list is going to be about solo queue. I thought about doing a competitive tier list as well, but unfortunately, I don't really have too much information on competitive as the meta just shifted a lot. So I figured a solo queue tier list is probably going to be the way to go. Plus, it's more relevant to most of you guys anyway. So let's get started. The first character is Venusaur. As per usual, Venusaur in solo queue is S tier. Venusaur has insane carry potential. He can be played in jungle, top, or bot. He is extremely difficult to kill. He has a great early, mid, and late game. He has good objective damage. He has everything. Venusaur is just one of the best picks for solo queue overall. Next up on the tier list is going to be Gengar. Gengar is what you refer to as mediocre at best. Honestly, you could put him in either C or D. So Gengar does snowball and is very strong if he can snowball. But if he does not snowball, this character is actually terrible. In zap fights, you're pretty much useless. You have to like create chaos around the map, and the way you do that is by getting early kills and stuff. But if you do get those early kills and you can create chaos around the map and you can fight like 1v1s or like maybe even 1v2s and you don't have like a bunch of people ulting the buddy barrier and save people and just melt you, then I guess he's fine. Next up is Mime. Mime is kind of decent, I guess, for like a defender tank kind of character. He does have good burst potential. He can one-shot carries and stuff, but he can't really carry fights on his own. He can only like delete one single person, and that's about it. He's a pretty decent character. He's good at all stages of the game, but he's nothing special. He can't do objectives on his own, and that's probably one of his biggest downsides. So I'm going to put Snorlax in B tier as well, but for Snorlax, we're going to be playing Flaylax, actually. I think Flaylax is better than Heavy Slam in solo queue. It actually has pretty decent carry potential. You can do a lot of damage with it. It's not as good as, like, say, Outreach Dragonite, which is like the same kind of archetype, but I think it's pretty decent as a carry if you want to have some fun playing a troll build or whatever. Next up is Gardevoir. Gardevoir is pretty good. Ideally, you would play her in the jungle. I'd probably put her in A tier. I think Gardevoir has a lot of carry potential, but she's extremely vulnerable to being rushed down by like assassins, so things like Talonflame and whatnot. And in solo queue especially, it's very hard to get peels. If you could consistently get peels in solo queue, and maybe there weren't so many assassin players, then maybe Gardevoir would be S tier, but I'm gonna leave her in A tier for now. I think she's really good carry, but very vulnerable to things like, say, Absol and whatnot. Next up is Absol. I think Absol's okay for carrying and playing in solo queue. Obviously, this character is complete garbage in competitive, but he actually does pretty decent damage. He can snowball a game extremely well. His first Bs are among, if not the best. You can pretty much guarantee a kill every single time. His biggest downsides are if you die a single time, you're pretty much screwed for the entire game. And then his zap fight, even if you are ahead, is extremely difficult to play out because he has no Unite move. Pretty much after the 5-minute mark, it becomes very difficult to play the game. So Garchomp got buffed last patch, but if I'm being honest, the only buff that actually mattered was the fact that Dragon Rush combo, Dragon Claw plus Dragon Rush thing, is actually 100% consistent now. I think Garchomp has been extremely strong, especially in solo queue for a long time. I think he is one of the premier carries in solo queue. He has insane objective secure. He can 1vx extremely well. He does very well with farm. He scales extremely well. He actually has a weirdly deceptively good early game if you can get all your stacks up and you just start autoing things. It's pretty hard to lose lanes if you go focus band and you just auto attack people. People really won't expect this damage, so I think Garchomp is really strong. We played Dragon build. I think the Earth build is complete garbage. I don't think you would ever want to run that, if I'm being honest. And I've been having a lot of success with it. Even in like competitive play, I've been playing Garchomp in the jungle. I think it can be played in any role, and it can be played with great success. Well, I guess he can't be played bot lane in 113. He can be played top or jungle. Lucario's up next. I'm actually going to put Lucario in S tier. So I think the E-Speed build was like an A tier build, mainly because yeah, you did a lot of damage, but it becomes really hard to like 1v5 and like do objectives and whatnot when your team is inting. But I think Pop Close Combat is an S tier build because one, it pretty much guarantees that no team can ever get an objective against you. B, it is completely brain dead. And then C, it is actually just extremely overpowered. The buffs to close combat are just so insanely, stupidly broken. I don't know why they added lifesteal and unstoppable to the move. This character has literally been meta for like the 6 months this game has come out, and every single time they try to like nerf it to like make it slightly worse, they end up buffing it as well, and they just bring it even more into relevancy. Like I'm pretty sure Lucario is stronger this patch than he was the last patch. And Lucario is a menace last patch. What I'm saying is, please stop compensation buffing this character. Just let him die for like a patch or two. Please, please. Next up is Crustal. So I'll be honest, I don't know anything about Crustal. I think this character is garbage. If I had to put him somewhere, I'd put him in like F tier, but I never see Crustals, and I will never play this godforsaken character. So I'll let someone else decide that. Next up is Greninja. Greninja carrying, very strong. So I was originally going to put Greninja in A tier, but then I ended up playing Greninja yesterday, and I remembered when you play Surf Greninja, you can literally just 1v9 every single game. All 4 of my teammates decided to sprint it down at the speed of sound, and I still managed to carry the entire game. I legit just like 1v forward and then got zap afterward, and just, I don't even know. This character in solo queue is insane. The resets, the carry potential, it is just so good. Greninja, god tier in solo queue. Next up is Talonflame. So I think Talonflame is really strong. I think I put him between like A and S. I don't know. Maybe I'd put him in S tier. So Talonflame has a lot going for it. You have assassination potential, you have objective secure, you have early game, you have okayish late game, you have a really short cooldown on your ult, and you have the ability to score. So you have like a lot of things you can do on Talonflame. You have a lot of mobility, you can go steal buffs well, you can dive enemy carries. The only issue is you can't really like team wipe on Talonflame like you can with characters like say Lucario or Venusaur, Garchomp, or Greninja. But outside of that, I think Talonflame is a very, very strong character. The fact that you can't like 1v5 team fights is the only reason why I'm putting it in A tier instead of S tier. But I still think Talonflame is an extremely strong character. Very good for solo queue, even after the nerfs. I think that the Fly and Flame Charge build is stronger than the Brave Bird build, but I think the Brave Bird build is viable as well. Okay, next up is Charizard. So Charizard got buffed last patch, obviously. I think it's solo queue. I mean, I'd put this in like a similar position to Talonflame, where A or S. This is such a hard decision for me. Charizard is really good, but he does have downsides. His biggest downside is being that he's ult reliant. But obviously, after the buffs, now that you have so much mobility, it becomes much less ult reliant. So now that you can move during flame charge, or not flame charge, flamethrower and fire blast, you have an ability to kite out in fights a lot better without ulting and whatnot. And when you do ult, you're pretty strong. I think I'm actually going to put him in A tier just because his ult is really strong. But if you're in a team fight and you're trying to like 1v5 or whatever, right? You're the Zapdos or whatever, your team is trolling you. If they just press their ults and you use your ult, even if they trade like 1 ult for like 3 ults, like you use your ults and they use like 3 of their ults, you're in a worse position because now you can't really carry a fight too well. I think he's too ult reliant to really be like an S tier character, I guess, is what I'm getting at. Like, if your ult ends up getting canceled, you're actually screwed. If they have like a Wiggly on their team, they end up ulting it, you're screwed. If they have a Sobro and they end up ulting you in your ult, you're screwed. I think he's a lot better outside of his ult now, but I don't know. That's the only thing keeping me out of putting him in S tier. I'll put him at the top of it. Zera, I'll put Zera in B tier. I think both builds are viable. Volt Switch plus a Discharge and Wild Charge plus a Spark. I think both those sets are viable. But I think Zera got nerfed extremely hard. Zera used to be my go-to carry in solo queue. This character was actually just so insane. You had a super low cooldown ult. You had a discharge doing infinity damage, like the damage of an ult, and it was AoE, and it was on like a 10-second cooldown, not balanced. But I think after the nerfs, the damage reduction to all of his skills, the spark, the discharge to his ult, all that stuff has really screwed him over. I think Zera is pretty mediocre now, which honestly is probably a good thing because I hated playing this character. He was just so overpowered, I couldn't resist playing him. All right, next up is Cinderace. I think Cinderace is a very strong character in solo queue. I play him very often as a troll build, attack way top lane, and in the jungle. Obviously, he's better in the jungle. I think both Blaze Kick and Pyro Ball are viable on him, and Flame Charge is probably the way to go always. He has very good objective secure. He has very good potential in fights. He has an okay first Dreadnought. It's kind of his weak side is first Dreadnought is pretty mediocre unless you go Pyro Ball, but I value Blaze Kick being able to move around and just give you an insane steroid much more. Slight downside, his early game is really, really bad. So maybe things that snowball really hard, like a Talonflame or whatever, if they have a bunch of divers, they can maybe get out of control and be very difficult to deal with. But it does scale very well. It does do objectives well. He team fights well. Once he hits like level 11, he's pretty much a god. I think Cinderace is very strong. He's one of the premier solo queue carries. Next up is Eldegoss. I don't even want to try rating supports. I don't know how supports are in solo queue. Who cares? It's a support. Just play it or something. I'll put Blissey there too. Who cares? Next up is Kramer Ant. I think Kramer Ant is. I was trying to think of a pun that had trash in it, but I didn't have a pun. This character sucks. Kramer Ant can do damage, but he's extremely vulnerable. So if he ults, he's gonna die to everything in the game. If he doesn't ult, he doesn't do anything. His surf catches are okay, I guess, but I mean Pikachu can do the same thing and just ult and run away, and I think Cram just sucks. I think that the Hurricane and Surf build is the better build to go on him. All right, next up is Blastoise. I think we're gonna put Blastoise in D tier. So I don't think Blastoise is bad, but I don't think he's particularly good either. I think Rapid Spin is probably a better build for him in solo queue. I played Rapid Spin Water Spell yesterday and it didn't feel terrible, but honestly, after the nerfs to his ult, that did feel pretty bad. It feels pretty hard to secure objectives if you're playing jungle. If you're playing lane and you're going like surf or whatever, I'd ask myself, why am I not just playing Mr. Mime? Because I think Mime does everything Blastoise does, but better. I think Blastoise is pretty mediocre right now, so we'll leave him in C. Next up is Pikachu. So Pikachu is weird in the sense that Pikachu itself is very strong, but is also very vulnerable. I think I'm going to put it in B tier. So Pikachu can do a lot of damage and can definitely evaporate a single target, but that's all you can really do. And then on top of that, if the enemy team has a lot of assassins, you're basically a sitting duck and very team reliant. The reason why Pikachu is so good in competitive is because you can pretty much guarantee first Dreadnought for your team because you have such a bot lane advantage. But in solo queue, that's not always going to be the case, right? So like though Pikachu can do a lot of damage and you can win that early game and you can maybe even get your ult off for first dread, I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's going to do too much of Zapdos either. I'd say I think Thunderbolt is the best build for it in solo queue, but honestly Electro Ball isn't bad either. Next up is this. Let's just go back to beta. Next up is Ninetales. So Ninetales has similar issues to Pikachu. You have a really good early game, but your ult sucks really bad, even worse than Pikachu's. And then you're a sitting duck to any assassin, and you get screwed over by full heal. I think it's pretty mediocre, I guess. I think that the Blizzard Avalanche build is the way to go. Next up is Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff goes in A tier. Wigglytuff is a menace. I hate Wigglytuff. Good ult, good sing and rollout are very strong. Has good early game, very annoying tank, hard to deal with. If you want to play a tank in solo queue, Wigglytuff is probably the way to go. Next up is Slowbro. So I actually think Slowbro is pretty decent in solo queue. I don't know if I put it in A or B, but I put him somewhere in there. I don't know. I think Slowbro is actually pretty good, even on his own. I think he can solo carries, which is really weird for a tank. And then I think he has good impact in team fights as well. So he has a pretty good early game if you know how to press A properly with Muscle Band on. He has good late game. His only struggle is before you hit level 11 after the early game is passed. But I think he can just ult someone and try and bypass that. I think he's pretty decent. I actually played him in the jungle yesterday and it worked out pretty well. I don't recommend doing that, by the way. Next up is Machamp. So, as you guys know, Machamp just got buffed. I think Machamp is pretty strong. I don't think the buffs affected his rating in solo queue, though I do think it helped in competitive. His early game is stronger now, and his late game is stronger now that he has more range. I think Machamp has always been really good at deleting a character from the game or multiple characters with your ult, especially if you can stack up attack weight. You pretty much always go dynamic punch. I don't think there's a single situation you'd ever go submission, even after the buffs. But both close combat and cross chop are viable. Machamp's biggest downside is that before level 9, he's pretty lackluster, so he's not going to really do too much at Dread. And then he's extremely ult reliant, which can be bad in like mid-game-ish fights if you don't want to like blow your ult before objectives. And then he's also very bad for actually taking the objectives. So he can kill characters at said objectives extremely well. But if he wants to actually, like, say, kill Zapdos after killing the enemy, he is very team reliant to do so. You'd want, like, a Cinderace or a Greninja, something that can do damage to the actual objective, because he doesn't do any damage to it. You can only, like, burst carries, and that's it. That being said, he is very strong at bursting said carries, so I think he's a very good character for solo queue. Next up is Mamoswine. So I think Mamoswine is okay. I mean, he's just like a tank, and he plays aggro, and he gets you an early game lead, and he's not terrible late game. I don't know. This character Memo is so weird. I feel like he should be better than he is. Maybe people just play with him wrong. His early game is really, 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 really stupid oppressive. And I feel like that should guarantee a lead for you. Always. But it doesn't. Next up is Sylveon. I think Sylveon is really good in solo queue. So Sylveon has okay-ish early game once you hit level 4 and you can get Hyper Voice going. She scales pretty well, especially for an attacker. Her downsides are certain characters kind of just like screw her over. So like Charizard's really good into her, Gardevoir is really good into her, like Cinderace is really good into her, especially after the Blaze Kick changes. Dragonite was really good into her too. So like a lot of the characters that people are playing a lot are characters that just end up screwing her over. But I think she's pretty strong. I think she has good solo carry potential. She has good self peel, which is rare for an attacker. Her ult is very good at getting people off of you and then being able to sustain in fights, obviously, blah, blah, blah. Her level 12 with Calm Mind is extremely strong. Calm Mind being one of the best abilities in the game. And then she just does a lot of damage. She can take objectives well. She can kill people. She can 1v1 things. She can split. She can farm. She does a lot of things very well. I think Sylveon is an underutilized character. I think she's very strong. Next up is Greeden. Greeden is a menace to society. This character is probably the most annoying character in the game. You have a lot of strategies that you can do that are uniquely viable because you're playing Greedent. These include invade strategies. These include uh stupid troll like early game trying to like 1v3 in lane strategies because you can secure because no one can kill you. Greedent is really stupid. His late game is extremely annoying. He can do objectives okay if he ults them. No. I think Greedent's a really solid pick in solo queue. He's very difficult to kill. He has good potential and damage throughout the entire game. You can't kill him in any stage of the game, really. I just think he's a good character. I also hate him. Please don't play Greedent. Next up is decidueye. This character is the definition of trash. All right. If you thought Kramer Ant was trash, well, decidueye is omega trash. So maybe he's like D tier. You can technically do damage, but the chance of you carrying with this character is literally 0. So what's gonna happen is you're gonna get into a team fight, right? And then their Talonflame is going to press fly on you, and you have nothing that can stop it. And then you're going to want to cry. You're going to realize this character is trash, and you're going to uninstall this game in that order. Decidueye is literal garbage. The buffs didn't help him. You get run down so easily. I hate playing this character. Every single time when my chat asks me to play this character, I just want to, I don't even know. I want to cry. This character is god awful. It is an experience to play him. Next up is Dragonite. This is going to be a hot take. I think Outrage Dragonite is better than Hyper Beam Dragonite, especially in solo queue. I don't know about in competitive play, but in solo queue, Outrage is the way to go. I think Outrage Dragonite is actually really strong. I think it's like Garchomp but worse. But you know what? A worse version of a character that's insanely strong is insanely strong. Dragonets is still one of the best moves in the game. Outrage is a really good move. His ult is still pretty good. He has a lot of carry potential with it. Honestly, the build didn't really end up changing too much, unlike the Hyper Beam build. So the Hyper Beam build ended up getting extremely nerfed with the range changes, especially because it made playing out team fights virtually impossible, especially against characters like Cinderace who just outrange them and you could always just keep them away. It feels so difficult to play team fights with the range nerf, and that sounds really weird because it wasn't that much of a nerf, but it feels so trash. I think Outrage is the way to go. I think Dragonite is a very strong character. I think people are just like worn out of playing Dragonite because everyone and their mom played it for like the entire month where he was literally God. Next up is Serena. I don't know if Serena's A or B. I'll put her in A, I guess, but like low A. For the most part, this thing isn't ordered. I think Serena is a good character. I think the nerfs probably screwed her over really hard. Stomp build feels like trash. Triple Axel doesn't feel particularly good either. She's not a bad character, but the nerfs are noticeably bad. I don't feel like I can 1v1 a lot of characters that I used to be able to 1v1. She can still carry, like a lot of characters in A tier. But honestly, I feel like every single character in A tier, I could probably carry with easier than I can with Serena. And honestly, that might be a reason to put her in B tier. I guess we'll leave her in A now. Last up is Trevenant. I'll be honest, I don't think I even need to explain this one, but Trevenant literally does nothing. You go Curse Build, he does nothing. You go Woodhammer, he does nothing. You go Pain Split, that ability is literally getting rid of one of your abilities. You go Horn Leech, that ability is like high horsepower, but bad, and high horsepower is already not good. So, trash. F for his ult doesn't feel that impactful. None of his abilities feel that impactful. He's a defender, but his early game is not good, which is really weird because every other defender has a really good early game. Will-O-Wisp is okay at securing, I guess, but you just get run over by damage early game. He does not out heal all damage in a 1v1. This guy gets steamrolled. Anyway, that's my tier list. If you guys want more hot takes, you guys can check out my stream down in the description below. I stream every day. I'll be streaming Legends of Arceus when that comes out too, so that'll be fun. You guys can join me in that in 3 days, I think it is. Pog is they say. Till next time, take care.